Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to all of you to our debate on online ticket resale and the DSA, how to ensure fairness for consumers and live event organizers. Today's debate is hosted by Hannes Eide, who is an MEP from the S&D group from Austria and a member of the Culture Committee of the European Parliament. Thank you very much for taking the lead on this debate at the European Internet Forum. Of course, I will leave you the floor in a moment, but first I would like to introduce our guest speakers of today. We are joined by Gianpaolo Scacco, who is Policy Officer at the European Commission, working on the regulatory aspects for culture in digital policies at DG EAC on education, youth, sport and culture. Unfortunately, we cannot see Gianpaolo, but we will hear him very well. Then we're also joined by Raphaël Chauvelot-Ratier, who is Policy Officer at the Consumer Law Unit of the French Ministry of Economy and Finances, currently representing also the EU presidency, of course. We're joined by Claire Turnham, MBE, an award-winning campaigner, founder of Victim of Viagogo, giving voice to consumers who have been victims of scams. A warm welcome.
Thank you.
We're joined also by Magdalena Menhere with the group coordination ticketing of the Bundestheater Holding, the Austrian Federal Theatres. And last but not least, welcome to Olivier Darbois, who's director of Paris-based music promoter Corrida and president of the French Live Music Industry Association, Prodis. Welcome to you all. Thank you very much for joining us today. Now, with no further ado, I will leave the floor to MEP Hannes Eide for his opening remarks. We will then listen to all of you.
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah.
Over to you, Hannes.
Thank you very much for your introduction, and a good afternoon to everybody who has joined us this afternoon. Let me say that we all hoped that after the pandemic, we will have the opportunity to come back to normality, but we are now confronted with a war in Ukraine, which has also effects on our social and cultural life and in the organizing of events, either if it is sports or if it is culture. So let me mention this at the beginning. So to tell a little bit more about myself, it was mentioned I'm a member of the Committee on Culture, Education, Youth, Sports and Media in the European Parliament. I was mayor of the city of Bad Ischl for 12 years, and this city is European Capital of Culture in 2024. And I am the chairman of the supervisory board responsible for this big project. Before I went in politics, I was a cultural manager and I was organizing events, especially music events. I was a booker and tour manager of Austrian artists, and this shows my connection to this matter. And I have to say, the matter of the secondary ticket markets and especially the online ticket resale is a very important one. And this is why I'm especially happy to have the opportunity to discuss this topic with you, with experts this afternoon. And I'm convinced that many people, just to say most of us, had already been directly confronted with this ticket resale market. So I myself experienced the consequences as an event organizer, but also as a father of a son who bought overpaid tickets from Viagogo. So this shows that we need European rules on the secondary ticket markets and especially on the online ticket resale, because it has become a huge market. And when Viagogo could buy StubHub for $4 billion, then that shows how unimaginable much money is running with such platforms or over such platforms. So it is also a question of taxing and tax avoidance, and of course, as already mentioned, of consumer protection. The cultural and creative sector has to get every support it can get as a consequence of the cancellations of events during the pandemic. So thanks to our speakers, I'm looking forward to the debate. We will be able to hear much expertise, and as an Austrian member of parliament, I'm happy and want to take the opportunity to especially welcome the speaker from Austria, who is representing cultural institutions. We will try to work out this afternoon how we may ensure fairness for consumers, live event organizers, and artists through the implementation of the Digital Service Act. Platforms must be made accountable to the requirements of European law. The authorities of the member states must work together to ensure compliance. There have been multiple lawsuits against Viagogo already. The Austrian Supreme Court, as well as an Italian court, have declared the company's practices as illegal and heavily fined them. Additionally, platforms are now legally bound to make the ticket seller's identity public. Due to the company being located in Switzerland, executive action and prosecution of the company is highly complex and cost-intensive. As such, private individuals who seek compensation are often simply advised to drop charges, and this is unacceptable. And this is where the Digital Service Act has to take responsibility. The return of live events after the lockdown has led to a boom in the European secondary ticket market. And we have to take urgent steps to prevent illegal practices and to protect our artists and event organizers who are now in an especially vulnerable position. So I'm looking forward to hear from our speakers, their views and recommendations. Thank you very much so far.
Thank you very much for opening this debate and also sharing a bit of your background, which explains all the more so strong interest in this topic, not just from a consumer perspective, an MEP perspective, but also from the point of view of someone who comes from the sector that is affected. Now we will hear from Raphaël Chevelot-Ratier.
Thank you very much. I won't have a lot to add after Gianpaolo's intervention about what the DSA is all about. The fraudulent practices affecting European consumers have been increasing at the same pace as the development of e-commerce, which has really jumped. We estimate that the jump is around 20 or 30% from the health crisis. And also through the emergence of new actors, such as online platforms and online marketplaces. And in addition to, let's say, traditional fraudulent practices that we, as consumer protection authorities in Europe, used to, they are now mixed with a new type of deceptive practices that we used to call dark patterns, but that we sometimes scramble to define more specifically and to identify in terms of practices, in terms of commercial patterns. They usually consist in forcing the consumer's consent, either to buy products or services, or sometimes to make it more difficult to end the contract. And they use a different surreptitious means, like signs, colors, the use of messages, and the dark patterns are very often found on online platforms, online marketplaces. And we must admit that the EU consumer protection rules actually in place, they still have difficulty to outline their scope and to effectively curb their use by digital traders. And I might add that those practices are often also mixed with infringements of personal data protection rules, which brings the question of the interventions of different authorities on different themes, different sectors. In this context, the French presidency of the Council of the European Union for the first semester of 2022 has made the rapid adoption of the Digital Services Act, DSA regulation, a priority, and we thank the Commission for publishing this proposition, which has been followed by very intense discussions at technical level, both at the Parliament and within member states. without repeating the very pertinent provisions of this regulation that Gianpaolo mentioned, we can sum up its purpose by saying that it's here to ensure that what's illegal offline will also be illegal online, and that consumers are protected in an equivalent manner. So it's rather easier to say than to do. The negotiations are currently ongoing in the so-called informal trialogue between the European Parliament, the European Commission, and the member states, represented by the French presidency for this semester. They're going in a fast pace, and we're confident that satisfactory outcome will be reached towards an ambitious regulation. Besides this very important text, we should not lose sight of the fact that the EU law is not completely helpless in helping consumers which are victims of those practices. EU law has been adapted quite recently, actually, notably to ensure that marketplaces give some transparency in the parameters for referencing and ranking offers for products and services. And they should also give more information about the consumer reviews that are published. And those rules are not in effect yet. They will be in effect by the end of May, but they actually exist in French law, but they are they basically join the same purpose, and they should, in line with the entry to force of the DSA, make quite a more stringent framework for the practices of online platforms. Now, I wanted to add a few words about enforcement and how consumers can be protected when they are actually victims of those practices. The settlement of disputes with the trader can be looked for and reached with the help of the European Centers for Consumers, which exist in every member state. There's actually a Franco-German center in Kiel in Germany for the French and German consumers, but every member state has one. In addition, their complaints when they add up, and when investigations are also led by national authorities, they can lead to coordinated actions between those consumer protection authorities in the so-called CPC network. So it's an administrative network whose work is not very prominent in the public debate, but it's actually very important work, which basically in conjunction with the European Commission, member states decide annually of priorities, and then they engage with key actors, especially actors whose practices, let's say global actors, whose practices can reach consumers in every member state. So those stricter rules for online platforms mixed with this enforcement efforts, which are also following an increasing patterns, should ensure that European consumers are protected from practices such as fraudulent ticket resales. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Raphael, for your remarks, which have certainly helped us better understand the size of the problem and the rules that are already there. Now the floor goes to Claire Turnham, MBE.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to speak. Before I do, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge all of those people who have been affected by ticket abuse. Over the last 5 years, Victim of Viagogo has worked with tens of thousands of people. And I would like to bring all of those people to the forefronts of our minds, because this is a real problem for real people. And in every law that you're thinking about and changing, and you know, I commend you on doing that, I would just like you to really keep those people in mind. Because what we see is the pain every day. We see many people every day coming to us because they have nowhere else to go. So in 2017, I was ripped off myself buying some tickets to my family. And I was so incensed by the injustice of what happened to me that I desperately fought to get my money back, which I did. And by that stage, I became aware that many other people had also been affected, but they hadn't been able to get their money back. And this seemed very unfair to me. And so in February of 2017, I set up Victim of Viagogo. And we were immediately inundated with many, many people. Most of them initially were in the UK, but the movement since then has spread to being worldwide. We have now, and I also, before I go any further, also want to acknowledge all of the people who help us. They are volunteers, they are moderators, they are people who have already been affected by ticket abuse themselves, and they are now helping other people. We have seen so many problems over the 5 years that we have lots of valuable information. And I think what's really important in all of this is to really understand how important, as well as the legislation is, consumer education in terms of fairness, and also what ticket companies, venues, event organizers can do, artists and artist managers and agents. And the one thing that I would really stress is for all of those people to work together in a way that actually stands up for the fans, the ticket buyers. Because at the moment we have a system which doesn't prioritize those people. In the way when an event is put on, there are many necessary costs. One of those may be lighting or staging. What we also need is fan care. It needs to become upfront and central. There are so many people worldwide who are affected constantly and continue to be. They are misled to the site. The way that people come in via the search engines, that's something else that really can be focused on. I think in England, when within our group, we saw a dramatic decrease of people being ripped off once Google was banned from their advertising. That happened for a short time. Now, again, these sites, particularly Viagogo, masquerades as an official site. This is something that really needs to be addressed. Also, as well as putting into place strict legislation, as I know that you're looking at doing, and moving things to being more digital and more personalized, it's also about enforcement. You can, as the European member states, look to where other countries have brought in steps and how Viagogo has acted. They are, as any perpetrators of abuse, always trying to be one step ahead. And enforcement is something which we have found there is a real lacking of teeth when it comes to actually helping people. What I do know, and one of the things, after setting up Victim of Viagogo in 2017, I was asked to write some guidance, which I did, and it's available online for anyone from any country. And this guidance has now helped fans reclaim back 3 million euros or more from their refunds. But what we also know is that those artists that set in very strict terms and conditions when they are listing their tickets for sale make it so much easier for those fans to get their money back if there is a problem. In 2017, I was invited by Ed Sheeran's team to start working with him because he was a worldwide artist who was very concerned and at what was happening to his fans. And he wanted those fans to be able to come in for face value. Now, what we did, and I was invited on tour with him and went on tour in 2018 and 2019, and I'm now currently working on his current tour that's coming up, many of shows in Europe. If you look at what he has done, it's consistent throughout, setting those terms and conditions, working together with all of his team to make sure that these precautions are in place, which actually make it very, very difficult for touts to list their tickets. But the legislation hasn't gone far enough. So it needs more action by the artists themselves to ensure that their own fans are protected. And that's why I say to you, it should be seen as a priority, a show cost that gives as much priority as anything else in terms of putting a show. Fans really need to be put first. I think it's really important. Consumer awareness and education is also the priority. So that's really what I have to say. And you know, I certainly never wanted this to be a lifelong job. And what I've seen is that we constantly have more and more people. So what I would like to say to you is, please, whatever you do put in place within for your own people, is that you really do look at all of these issues and learn from us. We have a lot of information. We have a lot of knowledge that we have gained over the last 5 years about consumers and about what consumers need and how consumers are affected and the pain that is caused for them. And at the end of the day, music and theatre and sports are there for people to enjoy. And it's so sad that this now becomes such a misery and a harm for so many people worldwide.
Thank you so much, Claire, for bringing your experience and your initiative to this exchange, and congratulations on your work, to you and to the volunteers who are behind Victim of Viagogo. I do know some people who have bought Ed Sheeran's concert tickets, and I'm glad to hear that you're working with him, with his team on this.
The one thing I didn't say actually about working with Ed's team is, if we look over what has happened over the last 3 tours, and this is a very good example of what is possible with the care and commitment that has been put in place, is that in 2018, the tour had thousands and thousands of people. So when I was there, we were helping many people on a daily basis, queuing up for help and helping them to get their money back, which we were able to do. The next year, we had a handful of people. And this is where we can really see that this actually does work. It's a game changer. And this strategy, you know, we also welcomed these people to the concerts because they are fans, you know. These are people who have, through no fault of their own, been ripped off, and they need help. And that's where I think we also need to put emphasis. And now, in coming up within Europe, Ed Sheeran has around 30 shows that are coming up, and you will see that there are many less tickets than they've ever been available before. It doesn't mean that there are still some touts who are trying to exploit fans and ticket buyers. But what we do know is that, particularly because of the strict and the consistent terms and conditions that have been put in place across the tour, that when those people come to us, we will be able to help them to get their money back in a much more, in a quicker way, in a much more smoother, easier way. And that's really important.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you very much. And now give the floor to Magdalena Menhere.
Thank you very much for being able to speak here today. And I'd like to start this speech with a little story. Now imagine, Emma and Joe have always been dreaming about coming to Vienna. They did so for their 40th wedding anniversary and decided not to book their tickets beforehand on a platform, but to purchase them on site. So on the first day of their holidays, they walked to the opera and were approached by a gentleman in a suit with a badge right in front of the building. He told them that they were very, very lucky because he just got back 2 tickets for a sold-out Tosca performance that night for €70. This was totally within their budget, so they purchased them and were excited about the performance. Until they reached their seats that night. They discovered that they could only see half of the stage at those seats for paying €70, and of course complained about a complaint at the ushers. So the usher asked Emma and Joe whether they purchased their tickets in front of the opera house, peeled off a small sticker on the ticket and showed them the original price of €14. Emma and Joe laughed the performance and the atmosphere at the State Opera, but they walked out with the feeling that they'd been tricked, and they will always remember that. So I think this story shows quite well what our main challenges in this field are. First of all, fraudulent ticketing agencies come in all sizes. Second, in the end, the venue always has the trouble and the bad image. And third, tickets at reasonable prices are hard to sell to the right people. So why is this so? In Vienna, we do have a serious problem with dubious local ticketing agencies. Agencies rent offices around the Opera House, and there are lots of individuals, often one-person businesses, that sell tickets right in the streets. They dress like our ushers, have badges, even small portable counters stating official box office right in front of our doors. The legal situation in Austria is vague. It is legal to sell tickets in the streets if the sellers even have to pay a certain monthly fee for being able to sell in the streets. This has been recently introduced, but it shows no effect and it is hardly controlled. So there are restrictions regarding the number of sellers on certain spots, but no change can be seen here either. For example, in front of this or around the standing area, around the State Opera, sorry, about 6 resellers should be allowed, but as I said, it shows no effect so far. The really only effective measure would be a protection zone around the building, which totally bans all resellers. Ticketing agencies and resellers have only one goal, and that simply is to make money. They don't just take responsibility. They don't care about their customers because they only have them once. They sell tickets they don't even have often and will never get. They're totally sure that they won't get the tickets they are selling and often only inform their customers one day in advance that they won't be able to get the tickets. Cultural institutions in Vienna are primarily facing troubles with local agencies, but of course also with transnational platforms. The Salzburg Festival, for instance, just recently sued Viagogo for illegally reselling their tickets and achieved a partial victory. Well, I also said in the end, it's always the venue which has the trouble and the bad image. These resellers give wrong information. They don't inform about view restrictions nor about COVID regulations. The guests come to the performance, spend a lot of money, and are not only disappointed, but often even angry, of course, about the betrayal. We have to deal with them and we care about them. So we find solutions, explain, sometimes even give them better seats for the same price because we care and we want them to walk out happy after the performance. The bad experiences reflect in complaints on really all channels, on social media, ushers, sales, and so on. In the end, it falls back into the venue and of course the city. Now, my third point was that, as I said, tickets at reasonable prices are really hard to sell to the right people. As a state-owned institution, we want to, and we're also obliged to offer tickets at reasonable prices. Ground floor can be more expensive, but there are always certain tickets at lower prices. Now, it is hard to create sales processes that way so that these tickets also really reach the right people we want to reach. Finally, COVID has changed many things in ticketing, but unfortunately not solved our problems with fraudulent business models. We have far less tourists right now, and to be honest, it is hard to sell tickets anyway at the moment. The moment we reopened after COVID, ticket resellers came back immediately, and actually it's even gotten more difficult than before. So our conclusion is that only with an interlocking of sales and pricing strategies, effective legislation, including enforcement and technology, we can stand up to secondary ticketing. We need legislation that supports venues and organizers, protects customers, and technology that works for people of all ages. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Magdalena, for bringing in the point of view of the venues, of course, and sharing your expertise from the sector that has been affected already by the pandemic first, and also by this phenomenon indeed. Now, last but not least, we will hear Olivier Darbois.
Bonjour, hello to everybody. I'm gonna try to be distant from my text, and I'm gonna be a little bit more, how can I say, on the situation of the promoters. Because first of all, I would like to set that the live music business before the COVID crisis, of course, I'm talking about years before, the live music business has drastically grown in all over the world. And this is an attractive business for those illegal platforms. To give you an example, in France, the growth of the music business, live music business, was going over the recorded music business. It's to give you the size of the live music business in France, but probably all over the world. So obviously it does attract those illegal platforms to make business out of it. And they do in a different ways. And the easiest way for them, I mean, we have two sorts of tricks from those people. They obviously tricks by buying tickets, few tickets, and they duplicate those tickets with the I don't know how you call it, the barcode. I mean, and that means that if they resell those one ticket to 10 other people, 9 people will be not allowed to access the venue. So that's a drama. That's the first, I mean, the first thing we had, the first damage was from this. Now you have this, you know, the operational and the economical business, that the economical damage that we suffer. And I'm very, very happy that Claire could turn up to this session, because first of all, when you are a promoter, you are linked to the artist. And the most precious thing for an artist is his fans. He wants to, the artist wants to protect the fans. That's the ultimate, the first thing to do is to protect the fans. And obviously, the contract promoters have with the artist, it's written in riders, we have to protect their fans from the illegal platforms. And we are in a pressure to do so, which is not an easy task, as we can, otherwise we will be not in discussion today. So promoters have obviously in the operational, because producers find themselves having to deal with abused spectators prior to the shows and receiving complaints. And and we spend a lot of time to explain to people that they've been abused, and sometimes they don't even know they get abused. They only know at the doors. Some people are traveling from far to get to the show, and when we are to tell them your tickets are not valid, you can obviously measure, I mean, appreciate how the stress is for the abused consumers. But I'm gonna be a little bit pragmatism, because the people who are here need to understand the way it works when we contract with an artist. And I'm gonna be very basic. If you get a ticket at 50 euros, let's say the ticket is 50 euros, and that's the deal with the artist. 50 euros, you have to pay VAT, which is according to the country's various rates. Then you have what we call the PRS, the Performance Rights Society, okay, which goes to the artist or at least the author of the music. Then we have most of the time venues. Venues are based on percentage as well. Then you have all the local expenses, insurance, marketing, local riders, which is stage hands. You have security, obviously. You have sometimes the venues when they are not on percentage, flat fee venues, etc., etc., etc. And at the end, you have, let's say, from the 50 euros, you get a net of 25, for instance. This 25 euros is then split between the artist and the promoter being obviously the smallest part of it. And what the artist receives pays for his trucks, for his musicians, for his crew, for his traveling, for his equipment. So, I mean, it's very clear. When an illicit platform goes over, buy a ticket of 50 euros from the normal platforms and then resell it for the double, or triple price, or even more, all the difference between the 50 euros and the price they resell goes immediately in their pocket without to pay VAT on this difference, without paying the artist, without paying the venues, without paying the promoters. So it's like absolutely net profit for them. And you can use any system, we are doing now tickets, the promoters are doing tickets, name tickets. That means if I want to buy a ticket, I have to give my name, and the tickets wear my name. So it's a little bit more difficult for the illicit platform to resell it, etc., etc. Well, they are far in advance. They go so far, so quickly to go all around what we intend to do to block those illegal platforms. It's a nightmare. And the thing is, I want you, Claire, to be perfectly aware that if the consumers are the first victims, all the champions are victims as well. That's very important that you know. And I regret there is no an artist manager today to explain that, because it's the basic is that everybody gets armed and really in a deep way. Okay, we are having said that, we are in a business where money is something very important, like sports. Sports became like, it's not, I mean, if you see how sports is developed, it's not about amateurism anymore. It's like professionals with a lot of money at the corner. So obviously, the important thing is to know that the dynamic ticketing, which respond to the offer and the demand, will be probably down, like it does exist for the airline companies, for instance. You know, if you are very late to buy your tickets, you will have to pay maybe the double. So this will be one day in our business. It's very difficult to go against that, but this will be regulated, and this will be with yield management and for the dynamic price. And this will concern, obviously, the business, the concerts or the tours, which are obviously where the demand is over the offer. So it's a phenomenon, it's an economical phenomenon, but we are ready to do so in the right rules, and not allow the illicit platforms to go over to our business and to obviously damage all the chain, including, of course, the consumers. So in France, we had got a good law which says that illicit platforms cannot sell second market tickets unless they ask the authorization from the promoters. And let me tell you that none of us are giving the authorization to those people to make the resales. Their excuse now is that when someone buys a ticket and cannot attend a show because he's sick, because he has a problem in his family or a problem of transport, etc., then the excuse of this illicit platform is that they buy these tickets, they refund him, in fact, and they re-put on sale this ticket to some other customers. But this is only a trick from them, because this possibility, which was not open like years ago, now all the legal platforms can exchange that kind of tickets. The people who cannot attend will be able to find what we call a bourse in France, which they go where they buy the tickets in legal platform, and they will find a service where they can be refunded, and this ticket is automatically put back on sale to the normal price. So there's many things to do to block this illegal market. I would say that the French law is a little bit in advance than the rest of the European countries, but of course we are talking about law, which means that it's slow. If you want to get repaired, it's really slow, and because I mean, there is not an automatic service which says, okay, you've been harmed. I'm talking about for the consumers, which has been ripped off, obviously. But for the promoters, it's the same. I mean, we are suffering about that, and I anticipate if nothing is done, it will be more serious every year, because the business is there. We have to stop it, and we have to make understanding all the bodies, the cultural bodies, the administrative bodies, that this is a real fléau. I don't know how you say in English, sorry, a real disaster if we don't act now.